One misty morning in Kenya's Amboseli National Park, the sun peeked timidly over the horizon, casting long golden fingers across the grasslands. Lila Rivers awoke to the soft, rhythmic rumble of elephants nearby and the crisp scent of acacia trees swaying gently in the breeze. Her home was unlike any other child's. A sprawling conservation center her father, Dr. Jonathan Rivers, had dedicated his life to. From the moment she could crawl, Lila had been surrounded by wildlife. But among the giraffes, zebras, and lions, it was a tiny, orphaned elephant calf named Tembo that captured her heart. Tembo was rescued after poachers had taken his mother, leaving him wandering the savannah alone. Frail and frightened, he had been brought to the center, and from that day, he and Lila became inseparable. Under her father's careful supervision, Lila learned to bottle feed Tembo, walk alongside him through the dusty trails, and even soothe his nightmares with gentle lullabies under the starlit African sky. Tembo, in turn, became her confidant, her playmate, and in many ways, her brother. For her 6th birthday, Dr. Rivers gave Lila a delicate necklace, a small silver elephant pendant that shimmered under the African sun. This, he told her, clasping it around her neck, is a promise between you and Tembo, a promise of love, respect, and letting go when the time comes. Years passed, and Amboseli's rhythms seeped into Lila's soul. She grew strong and fearless, guided by the wisdom of the land and the unspoken bond she shared with Tembo. But as Lila approached her 12th year, she began to overhear hushed conversations among the conservationists. Tembo is ready, they would say. He must return to the wild. The thought of losing him gnawed at her heart. Yet deep down, she knew Tembo didn't belong behind fences. He was meant to roam the endless plains to lead a herd of his own. On the day of his release, the entire center gathered at dawn. Lila walked beside Tembo one last time, her fingers grazing his rough, familiar skin. "Go," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Find your freedom." Tembo brushed his trunk gently against her face, a silent goodbye, before lumbering into the tall grasses, disappearing into the golden morning. Time flowed like the Iwasungiro River. Lila left Kenya for university, studying wildlife biology, dedicating herself to conservation just as her father had. But no matter where life took her, a part of her remained anchored to Amboseli, into the memory of a young elephant who had once been her whole world. At 24, an opportunity arose. A documentary team was assembling an expedition to track and study elephants that had once been rehabilitated and released. Among the names on the list was Tembo. Heart-pounding, Lila joined the team. Days later, they set out across the vast savannah, their jeeps cutting slow paths through the tall grass. Local guides, including an old Maasai tracker named Kamau, led the way, following broken branches, distant rumbles, and ancient instinct. Every night by the fire, Lila would stare into the embers, clutching the silver elephant pendant still hanging from her neck, wondering if Tembo would remember her, wondering if the bond forged in childhood could survive the wild years. On the 5th day, the call came. Fresh tracks, a large bull elephant with a distinctive notch in his left ear. Just like Tembo had, the team set out at first light, the air cool and thick with anticipation. They moved slowly, the world around them heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint musky smell of nearby elephants. Every snapped twig, every shifting shadow sent adrenaline surging through Lila's veins. And then, out of the mist emerged a giant. Lila froze. The elephant was massive, his tusks gleaming like ivory sabers, his skin weathered and strong. But it was the eyes that held her, deep, intelligent, and somehow achingly familiar. "Tembo," she breathed, her voice barely more than a whisper carried by the wind. The elephant's ears flared slightly, his trunk lifted, scenting the air. A tense silence gripped the group. Kamau whispered, "Move slow. Speak from your heart." Heart hammering, Lila stepped forward, dropping to her knees in the dust, lowering herself to seem small, non-threatening. "It's me, boy," she said, voice trembling. "It's Lila." For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then Tembo rumbled low, a sound from the depths of his great chest. a sound Lila remembered from lullaby nights long ago. Slowly he approached, each step deliberate, ancient, and powerful. When he was close enough, Tembo reached out with his trunk, brushing it against her hair, her face the pendant. Lila let out a sob, unable to hold back the flood of emotions. Tembo's trunk lingered at the necklace, his touch almost reverent. The crew, stunned into silence, captured every second. Tembo leaned down further, resting his massive forehead gently against Lila's. It was an embrace older than words, a reunion that spoke of memories buried deep in heart and bone. Tears streaming down her face, Lila rested her hands against his forehead, feeling the steady beat of life beneath her palms. "You're magnificent," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." As the sun climbed higher, bathing them in gold, Tembo stepped back. A younger elephant, perhaps his calf, trumpeted from nearby. Tembo turned, hesitated, and then rumbled once more. A deep, affectionate farewell. He had a family now, and Lila, heart full, knew she had to let him go again. The journey back to the conservation center was bittersweet, but Lila carried with her something even more precious than memories. A renewed sense of purpose. Back home, she poured herself into her work, leading projects to expand protected areas, educating communities, and fighting tirelessly for the voiceless creatures who called Africa home. The footage of her reunion with Tembo went viral, touching millions across the globe. It became a symbol of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between humans and the wild. And sometimes, on quiet nights under a sea of stars, Lila would hear a faint rumble carried by the wind and smile, knowing that somewhere out there, Tembo still roamed the plains, free, strong, and never truly apart from her. She would sit on the wooden porch of her childhood home, a soft blanket wrapped around her shoulders, staring into the velvet night. The vastness of the savannah stretched out before her, a living, breathing testament to the life she had chosen. Every whisper of the breeze through the tall grass, every distant cry of a hyena or a roar of a lion was a reminder that the world was alive, wild, and beautiful. Sometimes she would trace the outline of the silver elephant pendant resting against her chest, feeling the cool metal beneath her fingertips. Memories would flood back. Tembo's mischievous trumpet calls, the rough texture of his trunk, the warmth of his trust. She knew that love like that never faded. It grew, stronger and deeper, weaving itself into the very fabric of who she was. In those moments, Lila would close her eyes and imagine Tembo leading his herd across the plains, teaching his calves the ways of the wild, trumpeting at the dawn of a new day. And she would whisper into the night, a vow carried only by the stars. "May you roam free, little one. May you know love as I have." The stars above seemed to shimmer in response, a silent promise between a girl and the wild that had raised her, a promise that would never be broken. Years rolled on, and the seeds Lila had planted in the fertile soil of Amboseli began to bloom beyond even her wildest dreams. The conservation center expanded, transforming into a thriving sanctuary that protected not just elephants, but an entire symphony of life. Lions, rhinos, cheetahs, antelopes, and countless others found refuge under its vast, watchful care. Lila's Wild Roots Academy became a beacon for young minds across Africa. Students traveled miles by foot, bus, and even boat to attend classes beneath the acacia trees. There they learned not just biology and conservation, but the deeper lessons of stewardship, empathy, and the sacred balance between humanity and nature. One of those students was a young girl named Amara. She had grown up hearing tales of Lila and Tembo, legends whispered like prayers across the savannah. From her first day at the academy, Amara showed a fierce passion for protecting the wild. Lila saw in her a reflection of her own childhood spirit, curious, brave, and endlessly hopeful. Meanwhile, Shani, the calf once rescued during the flood, had grown into a majestic matriarch, leading her own herd across the Shawnee corridors. Rangers often spotted her standing proudly atop grassy knolls, her calves playing around her feet, a living testament to survival, resilience, and love. One crisp morning, as the mist lifted over the plains, a great celebration was held. The Tembo Legacy Project was officially inaugurated, an ambitious initiative dedicated to connecting fragmented habitats across national borders, ensuring that no elephant, no lion, no creature would ever again be trapped by invisible lines drawn by human hands. As dignitaries, villagers, students, and rangers gathered under the open sky, Lila stood at the center, a soft breeze tugging at her hair. In her hand, she held a small silver pendant, an elephant, the same one her father had given her so many years ago. With a steady voice, she addressed the crowd. This is not just about saving animals. It is about saving ourselves. Every life we protect, every tree we plant, every child we teach, it is a promise. A promise that the wild will never be silenced, a promise that love, once given, will ripple through generations. Tears filled the eyes of many as her words echoed across the savannah. That night, under a blanket of stars, drums and songs rose into the air, mingling with the low, joyful rumbles of nearby elephant herds. Lila watched from a quiet hilltop, the silver pendant pressed to her heart. Somewhere beyond the horizon she imagined Tembo, wise and mighty, still walking the earth, his spirit woven into every blade of grass, every river bend, every newborn calf. And in the soft, ancient chorus of the wild, she heard it again. That deep, familiar rumble of love enduring, guiding, and shining through every dark night toward a brighter dawn. A promise that would live forever. Decades later, Amboseli had become a symbol around the world, a living testament to what love, patience, and unwavering dedication could create. The once fragile conservation efforts had matured into a sprawling, thriving ecosystem where animals roamed in safety and people lived in harmony with the land. Amara, now a strong and visionary leader, carried Lila's teachings forward with passion and grace. Under her guidance, the Wild Roots Network expanded across Africa, connecting sanctuaries, academies, and protected reserves into a powerful web of preservation and hope. She often stood beneath the same ancient baobab trees where Lila once spoke, her voice ringing clear as she shared new dreams with the next generation. Children gathered around her, wide-eyed, as she recounted the story of a young girl who had once walked beside an elephant named Tembo, a story that had become a legend. The Tembo Legacy Project continued to flourish, its reach extending beyond Africa. New corridors were built in Asia, South America, and other parts of the world where wild animals had long struggled to survive. Across the globe, murals of elephants and children graced the walls of schools and villages, bearing messages of hope and unity. And in Amboseli, Shani's descendants roamed freely, their great herds moving like rivers of life across the golden plains. On quiet mornings when the mist was thick and the sun barely kissed the horizon, if one listened closely, they could still hear it, a deep, resonant rumble carried on the wind. Some said it was the voice of the earth itself. Others said it was the spirit of Tembo, watching over the land he once walked. But those who knew the story understood the truth. It was the sound of a promise that had begun with a girl and an elephant, and that would, through the hearts of all who remembered, live on forever. Centuries later, in a future world where cities floated above forests and solar rivers crisscrossed the deserts, a young historian named Eli wandered through the remnants of what was once Amboseli National Park. Nature had reclaimed most of the structures, weaving vines around crumbling stones and birthing new ecosystems where human footprints had long faded. Eli, a scholar of ancient conservation legends, had heard whispers of a place where a girl and an elephant had changed the course of the wild. His journey led him here, to this sacred, forgotten land. Beneath the towering remains of an ancient baobab tree, half swallowed by time, he uncovered a weathered chest, its hinges creaking with age. Inside, protected by layers of silk and love, he found artifacts, a worn leather journal filled with drawings of elephants, faded photographs of children laughing among herds, and a small, tarnished silver pendant shaped like an elephant. As Eli held the pendant, a strange feeling washed over him, a warmth, a memory not his own. He could almost hear laughter on the wind, could almost see a young girl running beside a playful calf beneath an endless sky. That night, by the flicker of an old-world fire, Eli read the journal. He read about Lila, about Tembo, about promises whispered under stars. Each page pulsed with life, weaving a tapestry of devotion, courage, and the fierce, unwavering belief that love could change the fate of a world. Inspired, Eli returned to his city among the clouds. He petitioned the Global Council to preserve what remained of Amboseli as a heritage sanctuary, a living monument to coexistence. His passion ignited others, and soon expeditions began to restore and protect the wildlands below. New generations of children, born into a world of technology and towering glass towers, were brought down to the earth to walk barefoot on the soil, to hear the songs of the wind, to look into the wise eyes of the elephants who had endured. And among the new murals painted across the cities, on shining metal walls and floating sky parks, one image appeared again and again, a girl, her hand resting gently against the brow of a mighty elephant. Beneath the image, a simple inscription, "A promise lives forever." And so it did. In the decades that followed Eli's discovery, the story of Lila and Tembo became a beacon that transcended time, space, and even memory. Schools across continents taught their tale, not merely as history, but as a guiding philosophy. Their bond symbolized a truth too easily forgotten, that compassion, once sown, could bloom for centuries. Pilgrimages to Amboseli became rites of passage for young conservationists. Beneath the restored baobab, visitors left offerings, small tokens of gratitude, sketches of animals, handwritten promises to protect and nurture the wild. The air around the tree always seemed a little warmer, the ground a little more alive, as if the spirits of the past still walked among the living. Technologies evolved. Bioluminescent gardens lit pathways at night. Solar towers mimicked ancient trees. But at the heart of it all remained something deeply primal and pure: the land, the animals, and the eternal connection between them and the people who chose to remember. In quiet moments when the stars shimmered like scattered diamonds across the ink-black sky, it was said that one could still hear it, a deep, soulful rumble carried by the winds, a call, a reminder, a promise. And every time a child laughed as an elephant calf splashed through a restored river, every time a seedling was planted with reverent hands, every time a vow to protect life was whispered into the morning light, Lila and Tembo lived again, not just in memory, but in the very heartbeat of the earth itself. And within that pulse, woven into every breath of wind, every crashing wave, every trembling leaf, their story endured. It whispered in the hush of dawns yet to come. It danced in the laughter of children who had never known a world without wildness. It shone in the eyes of every dreamer who dared to believe that a single act of love, a single bond of trust, could ripple outward across oceans and centuries. And somewhere, beneath a sky so vast and ancient, it remembered the footsteps of all who had ever walked upon it. A young elephant calf, new to the world, full of wonder, lifted its trunk to the heavens. The calf did not know the names Lila or Tembo, but it knew somehow that it was free. It knew somehow that it was loved. And as it trumpeted joyously into the endless blue, the sound rose high and true. A song, a celebration, a living echo of a promise once made long ago. A promise that would never ever fade. The land that had once been a fragile battleground between survival and extinction had now become a sanctuary of hope. Where once there had been fear, now there was laughter. Where once there was loss, now there was rebirth. At night, under skies embroidered with a million stars, people from every corner of the world would gather around campfires, telling stories that had been passed down through generations. They spoke of a girl who had walked among giants, of an elephant who had remembered, and of a bond so profound that it outlasted time itself. Children would listen with wide eyes and open hearts, their imaginations soaring beyond the firelight into the vast savannah. They would dream of the wild not as something distant and untouchable, but as something living, breathing, something they were part of, something they were bound to protect. Elders would smile, their faces weathered like the bark of old trees, remembering the days when the fight seemed impossible, when the world teetered on the edge of losing its soul. And they would look out across the plains, seeing the herds roam free, hearing the distant songs of the earth, and know that love had triumphed. High above in the silver glow of the moon, the silhouettes of elephants moved slowly across the horizon, timeless and majestic. Among them, unseen but deeply felt, walked the spirits of Lila and Tembo, guardians of a promise that had shaped generations. And somewhere, a whisper would rise on the night breeze, soft and sure, carrying across the tall grasses and rippling through the heart of the world. Remember, protect, love. And so the story continued, etched not in stone, but in the living, breathing soul of the earth, forever. If you liked our new story, please like, share, and tap the bell to hear new stories told always.